Well, good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for the late start. We're going to call together the Board Legislative Committee of the East Bay Regional Park District on Friday, October 21st, beginning at 12:43. The meeting is now open, and I'm going to ask the recording secretary, Flora Santos, to take the roll.
Hello, everyone. First up in roll call, Chair Echols.
Present.
Present. Director Lane.
Present.
Director Lane present. Director Coffey.
Present. Happy to be here.
Welcome, everyone. We also have a number of staff present on the call. I'll recognize folks. First, we have Jeff Rasmussen, Assistant Finance Officer, Devin Reef, Principal Planner, Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. We have Sarah Kennedy assisting with supporting the live stream from Rock Solid. We have and then your government affairs team, legislative and policy management analyst, Lisa Baldinger, myself, your legislative assistant, Flora Chontosh, and executive assistant, Yuli Padmore. Also present are our advocates, federal advocate Peter Umhofer and state advocate Doug Houston. Welcome, everyone. And I can read the ways for the members of the public to submit public comment, if that's all right, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead. And I also would like to take the opportunity to welcome Flora Santos as our new recording secretary for this committee. And I also want to welcome our board president, Colin Coffey, and Director Lane. Appreciate them filling in for other board members who were not able to join us today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the welcome, Chair. Folks, members of the public can submit public comment via the following ways. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff may participate via phone and video conferencing. We are providing live audio and video streaming. For those members of the public not attending, public comments may be submitted either 1, live via Zoom, 2, via email sent to myself, fcsontos@ebparks.org, or 3, via voicemail by calling 510-544-2024, as noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we can begin.
Great, thank you so much. Let's get started. So we have first on the agenda, I believe that Dr. Alvarez was not able to join us today, so we will not be doing the Deputy General Manager's comments, so I will turn it over to Lisa Baldinger, who will present for the Government and Legislative Affairs staff on behalf of the Deputy General Manager.
Thank you, Chair Echols, and I'm honored today to turn it over to Flora Chontosh. So firstly, I would like to thank Yuli Padmore for her years in support of the Legislative Committee, clerking for us all. Today is Flora's first day as clerk, but she also is kind of serving double duty. We are going to be presenting our annual year in review presentation, which has been historically presented by our legislative assistant. So Flora has on a couple hats today, and with that, I'll pass it over to her to share a little reflection of what we've been working on all year.
Okay, here we go. Let's try to share screen. How visible is that? Hopefully it's full screen.
Looks good.
All right, I'm getting a verbal confirmation and a thumbs up, which is great. Good afternoon, committee members. Flora Chontosh, legislative assistant. And as introduced, I'll be sharing a government and legislative affairs year in review to just as a refresh and recap of what our team has worked on with your support through this year so far in October. We'll start with some highlights of 2022. 7 board legislative committee meetings will have taken place by the end of 2022. 12 park advisory committee meetings will have taken place. As things stand, this committee has considered 38 federal and state bills so far. We have engaged in state advocacy several times in Sacramento. We'll touch on that later in the PowerPoint. We have our team advanced 2 state member requests and 1 federal member request totaling $42 million. The Incredible Grants team worked to have the Park District awarded $53.2 million in 2022. 2 analytical surveys will have been deployed by the end of this year by the Government Affairs team. Over 124 letters were initiated and distributed by our team. These include letters of support, strategic relationship building letters, congratulatory letters, and some really exciting external communications. And then of note, over 156 meetings and events, some of which are listed below and which I'll share some visuals and reminders of, that engaged and supported our legislative work and our advocacy. This includes 14 site visits, 4 walk and talks, and 3 high-level relationship building events that we had a really unique opportunity to engage in this year. So that is what's to come. I'll keep it brief, but this is our legislative bill overview for 2022. Starting at the top left is our state overview. This committee considered 20 total bills. The Board of Directors for the East Bay Regional Park District adopted 19 resolutions in support of bills that this committee supported. And this includes 2 resolutions for co-sponsored legislation that the Park District co-sponsored with partners. And then 16 bills did not advance in the legislative cycle. 12 bills were chaptered. And so there's a lot of action on the state level just in 2022 alone. At the federal level, the legislative committee considered 10 total bills, considered and supported. 9 of these were also supported by resolution by the Board of Directors. 9 bills were introduced at the federal level, and 1 bill passed the House, but ultimately none of these advanced at the federal level. As for ballot measures, at the top right there, there was 1 supported ballot measure supporting the Oakland Zoo's efforts, and 1 ballot measure considered for opposition, which is on discussion for our agenda today. And I won't read these, but these are some of the priority bills. You can see that they touch on a lot of our different legislative issues: wildfire resilience, green jobs, funding, long-term funding via some programs. And it was really exciting to engage on a lot of these issues. Now, taking a step back and looking at the whole legislative cycle, so that's all of last year, 2021, and then this year, the legislative committee considered close to 190 bills, both state and federal, since the beginning of last year. And of the bills that were supported by the legislative committee, 28% of them did become law. So that was an interesting number to note. 3 bills stand out in particular since between last year and this year throughout the state legislative cycle. One of our co-sponsored bills, AB 2789, the best value contracting, was chaptered, and then AB 2610, though it did not advance, was really exciting chance for advocacy regarding ecologically sensitive vegetation management. And then 2021, as you might recall, AB 959, the nuisance abatement authority legislation, which was chaptered. So moving into some of our national and regional trends, 30 by 30, and at the federal level, America the Beautiful, a lot of this work around connecting and conservation were really big, strong trends and really important discussions regionally and nationally, and ones that the Park District was able to engage on. We saw funding discussed, connected with 30 by 30, with the infrastructure package, the wildfire package, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Some developments and new opportunities there. And of course, this is a list of some of the new partners that the Park District gained this year: legislative, new agency leadership. And each of these folks are are individuals that we sent congratulatory letters to and made a really strategic effort to build a relationship and get to know them and tell them how the Park District can be a partner. This may not feel like it was this year, but it was this year. Redistricting in the East Bay really, as you can see, it kicked off in September, but was concluded in March of this year. And this was following the census, where the Park District initiated the process to meet the legal requirement to establish ward boundaries. And this resulted in one new state Senate district and one new assembly district. And so that will certainly be something that we are working within new boundaries as we move into next year. Going into our legislative priorities, these are 7 priorities that we know our committee members are well aware of. We'll touch on each one briefly, but these key advocacy goals of the Park District Legislative Program we submitted corresponding state member requests and federal community benefit requests to the entire East Bay delegation for priority projects. These are deeply important issues that we continue to advocate on and that really drive our team's work centrally. And of course, of note, in 2022, as with every year, the Radke Championing Advocacy Award is awarded to a partner and a strong legislative advocate who works with the Park District, of which this year will be Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and something that we she has been has advocated for Park District priorities across the board. So starting with wildfire resilience, accomplishments include the delegation letter pictured there at the bottom, led by Assembly Member Mia Bonta regarding ecologically sensitive vegetation management. This was a full delegation letter. We participated in a fuel reduction site visit that was requested by Assembly Member Mark Levine from Marin to discuss some of our team's work and the fuels reduction work. Letters of support were received for the Anthony Chabot Carbonator Biochar pilot project. And on the right there, that large yellow machine is a visual of the carbonator itself. I was really excited to see this after all the discussion that took place. And the pilot project that is leading the way in the state as a project to work with biochar. And then $80 million championed in the CAL FIRE Fire Prevention Grant Program to restore native and fire tolerant habitat. Wildfire resilience continues to be an immensely important issue within our work, but for all members of our delegation and for community members, of course. Sea level rise preparedness. The photo on the top right is a photo from this January, a site visit to Hayward Regional Shoreline with United States Senator Alex Padilla's staff. The photo at the bottom right is a photo from the site visit to Crown Beach with City of Alameda and California State Park staff this February. Work around sea level rise preparedness continues in our meetings with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and in plans for very soon this week, this coming week, visiting Coyote Hills Regional Park, a site visit with United States Representative Ro Khanna staff coming up next week to discuss sea level rise and its impacts. Community health is our third legislative priority. The accomplishments this year include 4 walk and talks that were really exciting and really wonderful community-centered engagements. Over 270 East Bay residents attended walk and talks this year. Assembly Member Tim Grayson hosted one. U.S. Representative Eric Swalwell there on the far right hosted one, which President Coffey attended. That was at Lake Chabot just this last summer. U.S. Representative Mark DeSaulnier hosted a walk and talk, and the photo in the middle there, Assembly Member Alex Lee. But included in community health, of course, is our Parks RX program as well, something that we've discussed with Assembly Member Lori Wilson at Big Break, pictured in the photo there at on the bottom left at the Visitor Center. And so really just rounding out how important this topic is, and to guarantee this access for physical and mental health throughout our parks. Ecosystem stewardship. Our team participated in the ongoing discussions for 30 by 30 at the state level to guide investments, especially around biodiversity, equitable public access to open space. And then at the federal level, work around America the Beautiful. These are really important discussions that will be taking place for a long time to come. And they've really brought and centered these issues of ecosystem stewardship and something that we find ourselves able to contribute to at the Park District as part of the ongoing discussions. Green Jobs, the government affairs team was able to assist in advancing the state process for developing a permanent core facility in the East Bay at Las Trampas Regional Preserve. This partnership, working with California Conservation Corps, has been really exciting. And as you can see, 89% of respondents in a survey in the East Bay supported providing safe and outdoor jobs for youth, and green jobs are just incredibly important and something that certainly our Park District supports to develop a career pathway. Coming to the end here of our priorities, welcoming visitor use facilities, $3 million that were secured for the south of Bailey Road staging area at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, in partnership with Assembly Member Tim Grayson. And he's pictured there on the right, walking with folks at his walk and talk, which board members also attended. $3 million advanced for the federal community benefits program for the Port Chicago Visitor Center in partnership with United States Representative Mark DeSaulnier. His walk and talk at Thurgood Marshall is pictured at the bottom. It was one of the highest turnouts we have ever had for a walk and talk, and was just immensely exciting discussion, and seeing folks learn about the history and also the future plans was just infectious. It was a fantastic day. And then the enacted sponsored legislation for AB 2789 to provide the Park District with the ability to utilize contractors and the best value and design process for large-scale restoration projects. A lot of exciting work happening around visitor use facilities in the Park District. Climate-friendly transportation. I included this tweet on the right because you can see that folks are excited to learn about public access to parks via public transit, via BART, increased bike racks. This is something that really continues to capture community support. The government affairs team submitted multiple community project funding requests for climate-friendly transportation projects. There was recently a funding site visit to the Martinez Intermodal Station just last week that the grants team coordinated. There were discussions, ongoing discussions and strategic meetings with BART and AC Transit regarding public transit to parks and leveraging Measure FF funding. And then the 5 trail projects submitted for consideration through the federal process. So just something that we see as a continued and important advocacy item. Advocacy that will continue into 2023. We're referring to it as environmental and cultural education. And this in this year, it has centered largely around exoneration of the Port Chicago 50, something that our each member of our team is truly excited and passionate about. This includes SJR 15, the resolution from Senator Glazer, letters of support that are ongoing with the collection that our team is distributing letters of support and collecting them, phone calls, letters to elected officials and the administration. And I will note that Deputy General Manager, Dr. Alvarez, was able to attend an event recently with the Vice President of the United States and took information about Port Chicago and the exoneration efforts, and really underscoring that our team is working on this at a federal level and involving all partners in all parts of government. And you can see some of the events below in the list there that took place, ranging all the way from April into October. And October included the Park Advisory Committee site visit to both the south entrance of Bailey Road and north into where the site of the future visitor center. So a lot of good traffic through this really important location, and for many folks for the first time. Moving to our federal and state advocacy, in February, there's an image there of our virtual Sacramento Day. That was our meeting with Mia Bonta and her staff. In June, we traveled to Sacramento in person to meet with folks in their offices and to discuss advocacy issues. Most recently in September, the annual Legislative Appreciation Luncheon took place in Sacramento, and there was an agency grants discussion that took place as well with the agencies pictured here. That was really fruitful and beneficial discussion. As for federal, on the right, the federal advocacy priorities, exoneration of the Port Chicago 50 continues to be a top priority. Funding for Thurgood Marshall Regional Park and home of the Port Chicago 50, and active transportation funding via the Federal Community Benefits Program. These were themes throughout 2022. The relationship building events that I mentioned, pictured on the bottom right, Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency, Wade Crowfoot, and members of the 30 by 30 coalition from around the region. We were able to host their convening meeting and celebration kickoff in April, right around Earth Day, to celebrate the progress on 30 by 30 and the report, the Pathways to 30 by 30 report that came out. On the left, the United States Environmental Protection Agency Clean Water Act, the 50th anniversary press conference in the region was held at Dotson Marsh just last month in September. Chair Eccles spoke at that event, and it was a really exciting chance for partnership with the US EPA. And as you can see, well attended by regional environmental stakeholders. And then just recently, the 30 by 30 kickoff event that took place in Sacramento. These have all been really strong chances for meeting with partners and meeting with fellow leaders in environmental work and advocacy. District surveys, reports, and research, the capital project prioritization policy, and the engagement process through the Park Advisory Committee was extremely exciting. The capital project prioritization criteria was discussed with several stakeholders and is something that continues to support the Park District's work. A fall voter survey will be in the field before the end of the year, and results will be a part of the government affairs team's work plan. As we near the end, just a few snapshots of tweets of the year. I won't read them all, but they encompass state level representatives, federal representatives, some really special shout outs that we've received over the year. We do tweet regularly from our account. We're up to about 446 followers, and it's a great platform to share celebrations. An example is at the top left there when AB 2789 was passed. And the quote from the Deputy General Manager about the Park District's work in nature-based solutions, climate resiliency on public plans. This is really a chance for us to share the information that the Park District is producing and to engage with partners online on this platform. Looking at funding and celebrating the $53.2 million that was awarded I won't read them, but at the top here are the 41 grant applications that were submitted. 94.2 million was requested, which really symbolizes just incredible work done by the grants team. And the bottom section detailing the awarded 23 grants totaling $53.2 million, and just some incredible opportunities that come with this funding through this year and likely into next. Looking into 2023 and the legislative program overview that will come for next year leading into 2024 as well. The Access for All initiative will be part of it with the California Natural Resources Agency. We have 2 members in our legislative delegation at the state level who whose terms are ending. That's Senator Bob Wieckowski and Assembly Member Bill Quirk. And that will bring opportunity for new relationships with new delegation members who are joining the East Bay. There will be a continued focus on exoneration for the Port Chicago 50, advocating for permanent housing facility at Bollinger Canyon to support the workforce goals, career ladder, and green jobs, all in partnership with the California Conservation Corps. And then sponsored legislation for raising the general manager's administrative limit around contract approvals. And then of course, our annual in-person Washington, D.C. and Sacramento advocacy days. And an exciting site visit we already have on the calendar for early next year. Will be another legislative staff site visit similar to what was done at Port Chicago at Thurgood Marshall. Just a few months ago. We'll be going to Hayward Shoreline with legislative staff to discuss king tides in the first quarter of next year in January. All of that being said, we really want to thank our committee members, Chair Eccles, Director Lane, Director Waspy, our alternate Director Rosario, and today's alternate Director Coffey. It is truly a joy to work with this committee. And I won't speak for my colleagues, but just the encouragement I hear from committee members, the interest and the excitement really helps build the work that this team is able to implement. So I'll bring us to a close and thank you again from your 2022 Government Affairs team. I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add.
Great. Lisa, would you like to add anything before I turn it over to our other board members?
No, I thought that was an excellent and robust overview. Thank you, Flora.
Well done.
Yeah, excellent. Really. Flora, thank you. Fantastic job. And really my hats off to the whole team, to our Deputy GM Anna Alvarez, to our Chief of Government Affairs, Eric Feeler, to Lisa, of course, and you, and really just a very, very, very impressive report and well delivered. Thank you so much. And I want to obviously thank Yuli as well, who was a member of, who was the clerk to this committee and is continuing on with legislative affairs and working as the clerk to the PAC board, our advisory board. Thank you, Yuli, for all your hard work on this committee. Great work, and I really appreciate all the many ways that you contribute to the excellence of the Park District. So with that,
can I just say thank you, and it's been a pleasure working with all of you. I'll miss you, Doug and Peter. No, but I'll be right around the way. So as you said, I'll be at the Park Advisory with the Park Advisory Committee. So, but it's been a true pleasure, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I did also want to just clarify, I do know that our Director Lane is a valued member of this committee and has been part of this committee all year. I think I fumbled my words a little bit earlier on and made it sound like she was also filling in for someone today, but Colin is filling in for Dennis Waspy, and obviously we thank him for doing that. And Beverly, we continue to enjoy serving with you. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I do want to say thank you to everybody too. And I really appreciate this year-end PowerPoint. So I wonder if you would send that to me as an attachment. Okay, and I'll probably share it with Director-elect Mercurio, because I'm trying to gradually send him things so that it won't be quite so overwhelming when he comes in January. And he is a friend of DeSaulnay and has done some lobbying himself, particularly on trails and more recently American Trails. So I think he'll come ready to go. So thanks.
Could you send me a copy too, Flora? Because I actually dropped off during your presentation for about 7 or 8 minutes, apparently, and I got a notice when it came back on that there was internet was down all over Hercules.
Oh,
So it wasn't anything I could do, but I did set it up so if it happens again, I could use my cell phone and call in.
Yes, I will plan to send a copy around. Absolutely.
Thank you.
yeah, send it out to all of us.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, and actually, just speaking of the internet connection, can you all hear me okay? Because you guys are a little bit static on and off, but you can hear me. If you can't hear me, just try to send me a chat, and if it's really bad, you can call my cell phone, but hopefully, yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so I believe that there is no local update today. Is that correct, Flora? Oh, no.
We do not have any items. If there are questions, staff is present to answer any questions, but there are no items.
I'm saddened. That's my favorite part of the agenda. Finding out what we have dredged up on local events or legislation among cities and development projects and such. That always fascinates me. So tell Brian I want him back.
Yeah, that is really interesting, and it's an important part for us because then we look ahead. In addition, I did have a chance to go to the Board of Supervisors to support their resolution of exoneration on let's see, a week ago, I guess. And they were very knowledgeable about it. So I was really pleased to hear them because they had a number of things to say. So we have for sure, we have good support from the Board of Supervisors. And I think if we want some more, we can contact them again.
Great. Okay. Well, then in that case, we will move on to funding and grants update. And we have Jeff Rasmussen and Katie Hornbeck here. But I do want to thank Devin who showed, maybe he's already jumped off, but yeah, oh no, he's still on local issues.
You were fading a bit, Elizabeth.
Oh.
It does seem like it's cutting in and out, but I think you're
Okay.
back with us, Chair Echols.
Yeah, I'm gonna call in as a backup. So, but meanwhile, let's just get the next item going. So Katie and Jeff, or I don't know if Jeff is here, but Katie, if you can go ahead and start us off on that.
Sure thing.
And I do want to say I'm particularly interested in successes or failures of our applying for the Prop 68 various categories. Because we worked so hard on that, I want to be sure we're taking advantage of our opportunities. Thank you.
Can I interrupt? Is that number 3 in grants awarded just a mistake? I think we just applied for that 7 million.
Number 3, that is not Prop $68.
No, my question
Oh.
is a different issue.
Oh.
It says we have been awarded $7 million from the Coastal Conservancy. I think we have put in an application, but if we've already been awarded that 7 million, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. So yes, I'll jump to the grants awarded. So Director Coffey, as you pointed out, number 3, yes, it was a very quick turnaround. It's typically
Wow.
not that quick. Part of the reason is because we were invited to skip the pre-proposal phase and go straight to an application. And Mike Reeves, our Chief of Land Acquisition, had done a lot of communicating with the Coastal Conservancy even leading up to that. So they were pretty well aware of the project. And I believe some site visits had even occurred. This happened earlier this year. So yes, this is very uncommon. I think within a month of submitting our application, they replied and said that they are interested in awarding these funds. I always like to say grants are risky. So even though this says awarded, they still have to, the Coastal Conservancy staff still has to prepare their staff report and their recommendation to their board. And they are bringing this to their board for approval in February. So between now and then, Mike and his staff have a slew of documents that they have to gather for the Coastal Conservancy to package it all together for approval. So it won't really be official until the beginning of 2023, but it is, yeah, very exciting.
That's just huge. Congratulations. That just jumped out at me. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, it's great. It's these really big dollars don't really happen that often. So when they do, it's definitely cause to celebrate. So,
Well, and we were scrambling to figure out how to acquire that property and what other funds to use if this didn't come through. So this is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, it's great. And I really want to give all the credit to Mike and his team. They worked, they did a lot of that communication that's so critical in grants, just forming those relationships, getting out there to site, really selling the project. So, so that was the one I wanted to highlight here. And then there's not a lot to report on this month or in this report because it was only a few weeks of data. But then, so if Flora, if you close this, I was going to share my screen real quick and just share a picture, if that's okay. I just wanted to bring up the site visit that just happened a week ago. This was for a grant that we had applied for with the California Natural Resources Agency for their urban greening program. And so we had submitted an application for the San Francisco Bay Trail gap closure out at Martinez, the Martinez shoreline. And so we were invited to move to step 2 of the grant application process, which is a site visit. So the agency came out and we're allowed to invite community stakeholders, other partnership agencies. And so we got a really great showing. There were about 25 people in attendance. And just in the picture, I just wanted to show Director Coffey was there. We had folks from the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council, from the Bay Trail, from different elected offices. They sent field representatives. City of Martinez was there. So all that to say, it went really well. They definitely seemed impressed with the turnout. And, grant agencies more and more are really wanting to know and then see that the community is interested and invested in the project that they might fund. So just wanted to give, share my thanks and gratitude, not only to Director Coffey for attending, but also to the government affairs team who worked really hard to reach out to different stakeholders and send invites to get this support. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you. And then the last thing else, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just, both of those are really great. And I do want to say that with regard to the Conservancy, it's nice to have Bob Doyle on Mike's team, since he evidently is a friend of the Conservancy's executive. So I am just really ecstatic about that because that makes it possible for us to purchase the Foley property.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes.
I know, very exciting.
Thanks.
And then Director Lane, to your question earlier about Prop 68 success, Lisa gave a presentation. I'm not sure if it was 2 meetings ago, but in it, there was a slide that talked about the number of applications that have been submitted to Prop 68 programs. I want to say we've submitted approximately 18 to 20 applications, but maybe Lisa or I could send you the PowerPoint that actually has the specific programs that we've applied to and which ones we've been successful in.
And if you need the information, I can summarize really quickly as well in terms of what we secured, what the district secured working with the government relations team. If you'd like to hear that, Bev. Director Lane. Oh, you're muted.
I just know how much the Park District worked on that. And I just need some reassurance that
Return on energy investment. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I
But
understand.
we don't really need to do that right now, but I'd really be interested in that. And I didn't tell you ahead, so I can find out later. Thank you.
And we'll be sure to get you a copy of the slide deck that Katie pulled together and outline within the slide deck.
Well, I remember seeing that, but that didn't say to me what the possibilities were, So maybe I just need to talk to Doug at some point.
We can all powwow. Happy to chat.
Okay, let's have a powwow. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Unless there's any other questions, appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I think we're ready to move on to our reports. So Peter, if you would like to start with your update.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Peter Umhofer, Federal Advocate. Just wanted to give a brief update as everyone is focused on the election. 18 days away from the election, many local, state, and federal races that are a focus for the public. Just to give some numbers to the committee and board members, you may recall that the U.S. Senate is now currently made up of 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, or caucus with those respective parties. The outlook right now is 49-49, with 2 particular races of big focus for a lot of folks. But that could change, as we know. It's still 18 days out. Early voting is just starting, or it has started in many places. I anticipate it's questionable right now how things shake out in Georgia. If you do not get above 50% in the Georgia Senate race, there's a runoff on December 6th. So something to note. May not know exact election results on election night either. On the House, it's currently a makeup of 220 Democrats, 212 Republicans. There's 3 vacant seats. The outlook is, it's come down to 26 to 31 swing seats, with Democrats looking at about 195 seats and Republicans at 214 seats, with, again, these 26 to 31 seats up for grabs. And so that's the current state of play. Shifting to exoneration and the efforts that have been underway for a couple of years in earnest by the Park District and others. You may recall that in July, the House passed its defense bill, and that defense bill was an exoneration resolution that was sponsored by Congressman DeSalme. There's been a lot of ongoing conversations with the Senate and Senator Feinstein's staff. The Senate is expected to take up its version of the defense bill when it returns in mid-November. There has not been as many conversations, and as I think we all would have hoped, with the Navy and with the committee that's in charge of this bill in the Senate, but we continue to have those conversations. You may recall that Congressman John Garamendi is on the Armed Services Committee in the House, his district will capture Port Chicago Memorial and the ridge line above the park, but not the park itself. But he's very senior on the Armed Services Committee. I think he'll be able to be helpful on this issue as well. I've seen some amazing articles in probably the last 4 or 5 months about the history of Port Chicago and some of those family members speaking about their advocacy and their family members' history as naval sailors. I don't know if the board or others have connections to these folks, but I do think it would be helpful if they were willing to meet with some of our elected officials or do some additional advocating. They have some powerful stories to tell. In terms of using our networks and our connections, that's something we can talk about more, maybe closer to the end of this year. One example is Tony West, who is a board member of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He also happens to be brother-in-law of the vice president. That's just one example. Maybe there's a connection there that we can explore and talk more about. So I'll leave it there and shift to America the Beautiful. You may have seen the announcement the president signed a presidential proclamation to establish a new national monument in Colorado called the Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument on October 12th. That includes approximately 54,000 acres of Forest Service land. There's talk about other monuments, but not maybe not in this calendar year, but there's a lot of advocacy happening at the local level in various states. You may have seen some local events that happen around National Public Lands Day on September 30th. Many cabinet officials were out in the West touting various projects that have been funded or new initiatives that have been announced. Just to mention a few other announcements, you may have seen the Park Service Director and the Secretary of Interior earlier this month announced 2 expansion of 2 parks, land acquisitions at Great Sand Dunes National Park and at Sand Creek National Historic Site. Also, USGS announced $4 million in investments to improve urban lands and waters. Those are matching grants for what is called the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. Another example of things that the administration's focused on under this initiative is a new memorandum of understanding to promote equitable access to nature in nature-deprived communities, and that brings together 10 federal agencies. So administration continues to do this work along with really championing some other important initiatives, including co-management, co-stewardship of public lands and waters with tribes. This is new. It's been done in a few places, but there's a real serious effort underway to strengthen the role of tribal governments in land management and co-management together with the land management agencies. So people are very excited about this, and it's a space to watch, I think, going forward. In terms of federal bills in the process, it's definitely different than the state side. Bills are introduced, but bills are even introduced this month, last month, even though it's so late in the calendar year or in the legislative session, because they're expected to wrap up around December 16th this year. They do that in case negotiations happen on an end of the year package or an end of the year set of bills that get attached to something like this defense bill or the end of the year funding bill. So they get bundled together, sometimes called a lands and waters package, and they are attached with a must-pass piece of legislation. So just wanted to make sure people were aware that You may have seen the announcement on the National Discovery Trails Act that was introduced in the Senate on September 21st. The House had introduced their bill earlier this summer in July, or last July, but then had a hearing in April. So again, the House and Senate sometimes don't work on that same timeline or the timeframes that are much more defined and clear in Sacramento. So just wanted to share that with you as well. The big omnibus appropriations funding bill, which is being negotiated and will be in earnest negotiated between when Congress returns on November 14th. It expires on December 16th. So there's going to be a negotiation then to wrap up this year's work. And I think it will finish and wrap up this year because of a variety of different factors, including the two top Senate appropriators are both retiring. There's a real desire to clear the decks, move on to new matters, and not have issues that are left from this year carrying over into next year. So just wanted to mention that. Lastly, this lame duck session, which is often the term used after an election happens, there will be action obviously on the defense bill that I shared with you, the funding bill, the omnibus appropriations bill. There's been talk about additional funding for Ukraine, and there has been a lot of advocacy around same-sex marriage bill. Those are 4 bills that have been talked about. There may be other legislation as well. Next year, just to flag one issue that you'll probably hear more about, that is the debt limit and raising that debt limit. There's already been talk by other leaders from the Republican Party about using that as an opportunity to make cuts in domestic programs in order to get agreement on a debt limit. And so that could dominate a lot of discussion in the second half of the legislative, the second half of next year. Right now, experts say the debt limit has to be raised around June of 2023. So I'll stop there and happy to answer questions or turn it over to Doug.
Great, thank you, Peter. A lot of great information as usual, and really appreciate the update. I think looks like Colin had to step away for a minute. Beverly, do you have any questions for Peter? You're muted.
I've won.
Yeah.
And I apologize. I just had to go answer my front door. Apparently there's a goat loose in my neighborhood. And so they thought it might be mine, but I don't have any goats right now. So it was an important the doorbell ring there. Peter, did you cover when I was out the status of the DeSaulnier earmark?
I did not. I'm happy just to give you a quick update. So that $3 million that would be would be used for the Port Chicago Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. That is in process to be considered as part of that omnibus appropriations. So the hope is that community funding projects remain in the bill. There's a slate that's been passed by the House. There's some have been identified in the Senate. Last year, they carried over, meaning they were included in the final bill. That's the hope. But as you know, after an election, suddenly people have different changes of opinion, and we're no longer doing community funding projects anymore. I'm skeptical of that because of these senior members that I mentioned that are retiring. They want to get this done, and they've said they have community funding projects of their own that they want to pass. So it'd be a little weird if their projects got passed and other projects didn't. They'd have to include all of them. So fingers crossed that it makes it across the finish line. Director Coffey, So that's the update for now.
And then Peter, just to clearly identify on that, that omnibus bill is on the December 16th wrap-up timeline. So we would know around that time if they did or did not advance.
And it could carry maybe another week after that to closer to Christmas. But yeah, around that time, we should know what's happening unless they decide to carry over the negotiations into January. But I don't think they will. I think they'll finish up in December.
Awesome. And then just also for a little bit further clarity for our board member, my recollection from the community project funding from this past year was that it was around March, April that members seem to be really celebrating it. Is it sort of the bill passes and then there still is a little bit more work that has to be done before that funding is secured and can move forward?
That's right. This last year that work carried over, they didn't get it done until March. So you're right. There is a little bit of work. It has to be, if you get the funding, then there's a little bit of work that happens with the agency. Most agencies are pretty quick to administer the funds, but other times, depending on the agency, they can act a little slower or ask for some information, but pretty clear act of Congress, and most agencies are pretty prompt to distribute the funds.
Great. And then just as a final reminder that the DeSaulnier funding is not for construction, it's for pre-construction costs, design, and planning. And so there won't be any shovel in the ground, but we are really excited to get that ball rolling. And hopefully the funding will be able to be secured early next year.
Great, thank you for that update. If there's nothing else for Peter, I think we'll move on to our state advocate, Doug Houston.
Very good. Flora, if you're available, are you gonna
Yes. let
prepare
me
my
see
slide
what
deck there
Peter
for everybody?
Can do. How visible is that?
That is perfectly visible. Are you gonna manipulate it on your side then? Can I do-
Yes, I can advance to slide 2 if you're ready.
That'd be great. Thanks. And good afternoon, everyone. Some of the information I'm going to share is going to be a little bit redundant with what was presented by Flora earlier, but we'll forge ahead and just wade through this accordingly. So there's a number of budget related bills. You see them all listed up there. So it's budget junior, budget trailer bills, and I spent some time putting together a funding matrix that sort of demonstrated the evolution of where funding began and where it landed relative to this year's budget, and I presented that to your GR team. So if you'd like to take a look, it's a little esoteric, but I mean, I'm certain that they can make that available to you. So if we rewind back to the release of the January budget, you might recall that there was some reason for celebration, discussions around, boy, we've got a double-digit surplus going forward. Little did we know, between January and May revise, practically every month we were seeing nearly double-digit increases in our revenue receipts. So by the time the May revise rolled around, our $12 to $14 billion surplus had turned to a $90 billion surplus. And as you'll see, the actual surplus, the discretionary portion of that surplus, was more in the order of $30 billion after making their Prop 98 guarantees and addressing the rainy day fund and other reserves. So substantial amount of money. The budget, obviously, it makes very robust investments. There's a little bit of gimmickry that I'll get into a little bit later in the slide deck. But if you can proceed to the next slide, Flora, that would be outstanding. So just repeating what was discussed earlier, some of the direct allocations that were made available by virtue of this year's budget. One specifically at the ecologically sensitive vegetation management project request. There wasn't money attached to it necessarily. But what we worked on is to guarantee that funding would be available and that our projects wherein through the removal of some of our dead and dying trees down there, primarily in Chabot and other areas, when we're going in doing the thinning work, that we can do restorative work, and in the restorative work that it's ecologically sensitive and it's native vegetation replanting. That hadn't been the case. There was funding bolstered for the program, the fire prevention program, and working with Mia Bonta, our delegation, and in fact with the Speaker's office, we managed to get language specifically in the budget moving forward to ensure that we can compete for some of those monies for those types of projects. Parks local government assistance programs in this year's budget. $35 million through the Recreational Trails and Greenways program. Myself working with my client base and East Bay's and your GR team as part of the leadership group. We managed to secure this money, much needed. There was a Prop 68 component associated with this. That was, I think the demand was 12-fold. So for the $30 million available, I think they had $400 million in requests. So the need and demand was all obviously there. $240 million for the statewide park program. East Bay has applied for this program on numerous occasions. We have not been successful. And there's a number of reasons why we haven't been successful, but here's an opportunity to, again, get back into the queue. $1 billion in additive funds for the active transportation program this year. 25 million for the outdoor equity grants fund, and then $100 million for urban greening. I think Flora evoked that term earlier that we were applying for something. And I just note that I put these asterisks by some of these programmatic funding categories because some of these amounts are out year spending. So we have money for this year. And then part of the gimmickry in trying to meet the GAN limit is to push some of the funding and the surplus forward into out year budgets. What does that mean? Well, that means that if we don't have the surplus and if our surplus in turn turns to a deficit, that these monies will be vulnerable. So I just, it's just a caveat when I'm putting forward this information. Go ahead, Flora. Thank you. Some of the other monies that are available, 240 in forest health grants, again, fire prevention, where we did get our provision in that particular program, and then the RFFCP grants pod as well. On the climate side, State Coastal Conservancy got a bounty of new revenues in the budget. There's a $100 million Bay Area set aside through the Conservancy for nature-based solutions, 30 by 30, meeting 30 by 30 objectives. WCB got a substantial tranche of money, and they're very interested and anxious to hear from applicant entities out there. They really want to get this money out the door sooner than later for fear that the budget may turn around. So encouraging the grants team down there at the Park District to have some conversations with John Donnelly and his team if we have projects that in fact are in the queue. Money through biodiversity for fish and wildlife, and then $100 million for the state conservancies, all 10 up and down the state, including money. I believe it's somewhere in the order of $18 million this year, 18 million next year for the Delta Conservancy, which can fund some of our projects out in the Delta region. Next slide, Laura. So some of the bills that we were actively monitoring this year, obviously our sponsor bill 2789, another one 1789, which requires state parks to do the first update and revision of its statewide park or trails master plan in 13 years, 12 years. Very necessary and needs to be done by 2024. In addition to that, not only are they updating the plan, they need to identify how they're going to meet and fund some of the objectives that are realized through going through this exercise. So important piece of legislation. 2463 extends the exemption for volunteer and volunteer work from the prevailing wage requirements on public works, primarily around environmental works in the state of California. 2278 requires an annual legislative report on the meetings and meeting 30 by 30 goals. So it's a good government bill, accountability. And then our Parks Make Life Better resolution also was chaptered. Just to note that our the chair of Water Parks and Wildlife, Rebecca Bauer Cahan, was the author of that bill this year. Next slide. On the Senate side, 926, it accelerates the pace and scale of prescribed firework. Burn bosses, it helps them on liability issues if there is a renegade or rogue fire, that it would help to cover for some of those losses in those instances. SB 1078 is the second iteration of this bill, and unfortunately, the second time it was vetoed. And what it's proposing to do is, if there is vulnerable properties subject to sea level rise, that a local agency could go step in and rent those properties and try to raise some revenue to pay off the loan through rental programs. Regional park districts, we weighed in and asked that we be able to participate and be eligible, but unfortunately, again, this is the second time that bill was vetoed, and I suspect it probably won't reappear anytime too soon. Governor was pretty emphatic in his veto message. And then SJR 15, again, a joint resolution on the Port 50 exoneration that was chaptered into law. So remaining slide for. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the last slide. So on the budget, again, you know, we've had a very robust spending year, obviously, but going forward, when I denoted some of those programmatic funds, a lot of them are going to more than likely be pretty vulnerable next year. And that is through both the controller's report and through the Department of Finance. We're seeing a very much a strong trend, not a recessionary trend, but definitely a decline in revenues. The controller's report is $7.5 billion since July, down from projections, and the DOF is at $5.2 billion in the rears right now. So that's going to be presenting some challenges to folks moving forward on some of these programs and some of these opportunities for funding. Not unexpected. This year was incredible anomaly, and hopefully we can ride it out, because all signs indicate that if we are going to go into some sort of decline or recessionary cycle, at least in California, that it'll be more short term than long term. So some of the other challenges, I don't know if you're aware of it, but we had an interesting skirmish this in the middle of the year this year, where we haven't seen this before. Normally it's been very peaceful transitions between leadership. And about 2 weeks before closing up the budget this year, a gentleman by the name of Robert Rivas, the Salinas area, decided that he was going to take a shot at trying to take out a assembly member Rendon. He had secured 37 votes. It's required to be speaker, you need 41 votes. And as a consequence of that, what we're seeing is just since that time, it's a lot of jockeying and it's instability in the House. And there's been two distinct camps that have been set up right now moving forward, just in the campaign season alone. Assembly Democrats, they're not communicating a whole bunch. And I think it's definitely going to spill over into next year. It's yet to be seen if there's going to be a change, if Mr. Rivas is going to muster the requisite 41 votes. But I've seen even still that there's going to be a lot of instability moving forward. And I think the budget's probably going to be complicating things additionally. And then our pro tem, Tony Atkins, will be terming out. So we're going to see also a little bit of jockeying and potentially some instability too on the Senate side. So that all sort of leads to sort of the overall climate environment, what's going on and right now over in the building right now. And I think we witnessed some of that. We had our legislative luncheon. It was a little more sparsely attended than we anticipated. And that's largely due to the fact that since COVID, it's been a lot of remote working. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I know that there's been an edict put out by leadership to try to get folks in the building. I don't know if that's going to happen necessarily. It's diffusing a lot of energies between that, and I'm sure you are aware that the old building, the Capitol, the historic building is still standing, but as we speak, they're demolishing what is called the annex, and they've created a new space for employees over there in swing space. And it's just not leading to the sort of collegiality and interaction and interfacing that we all experienced when they were in the old building. And from what I'm understanding, they were hoping that between the demolition and resurrection of the old building, that it would be about a 2 to 3 year turnaround. I'm hearing more in the order of about 8 years. So it's just a new environment. And I say this because of that diffusion of energy. I think it's going to be vitally important that your GR team do a lot more of its work in communication, interaction with its legislators and legislative staff, maybe more at the district level. I think there's going to be a little bit more continuity going forward in that area. So that would be my counsel going forward. And that's pretty much all I have to say for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug, for your report. Really appreciate it. Do my fellow board members have any questions for Doug, Beverly, or Colin?
Well, only that it does sound like it's a different kind of environment there in Sacramento, and it'll be like that for a while. Are they requiring people to come back from remote work to speak of, or are some people there working 100% remotely?
Let me qualify that. So right now we're deep into election season, and a lot of staff they are what we term on vacation. So they pivoted over to more on the election side, campaign side of the business. So a lot of them aren't in the building currently. I think leadership has asked that offices and that committee offices resume normal activities, but individual offices and their members, their legislators, are issuing different orders on occasion. I think they're allowing for a little bit more latitude and flexibility for remote work, particularly during the downtimes of the year, Director Lane. But I'm going to see there's probably going to be some modest changes, a little bit more remote activity on come Thursdays and Fridays when the legislature's not in session next year, I would imagine.
Thank you.
Colin?
Well, let me tell Doug about some activity that I've been involved in involving state parks.
Very good.
And as sort of a Ward 7 initiative to get state parks to open the Marsh Creek Historic State Park, which is 3,600 acres. It's a very large park, and it's right in the center of our parks and the Los Vaqueros watershed open space. And State Parks has had a general plan approved 12 years ago and has been sitting on it. We engaged with Senator Glazer and his staff, and also now with Tim Grayson and his staff, and they have both been eager to lobby the state to get that state park open. Our interest is just all the regional planning we want to do for regional trails go through that park. Mm-hmm. And you know, until it's open, we can't do that because they have to do their own specific planning for their trails. In any event, the city of Brentwood has written a letter. The city of Oakley's written a letter, and we're working on getting Antioch to send a letter, and then we're going to maybe more, you know, local community type groups to do this. And I've been told by the superintendent of Mount Diablo State Park that for the first time they've been asked to prepare a potential budget for actually opening and operating that park. So I think there's some momentum being built between the legislative efforts. And lastly, talking of legislative efforts, we gave Lori Wilson a tour of the Big Break Park last month, and she seems very eager to get involved in Contra Costa issues. And she also said it's outside her district, but it would serve the residents of Oakley. She offered to help out as well, and I think I sent our model letter to her staff. So I just wanted you to know all that's going on. If to the extent you pick up information from state parks, I thought that'd be useful.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard bits and pieces on the periphery, and that sounds promising. I'll do my best to try to track some of that information down in terms of where state parks might be relative to John Marsh. I suspect it's probably part of what's called a budget change proposal, and maybe we'll see something into the budget. But it'll probably be more on the plan. If they have they done all the planning out there, Director Coffey? I can't remember.
They approved a general plan 12
Okay.
years ago. It's publicly available on their website.
Interesting. And from what I gathered in my conversations with Assemblymember Wilson and staff, she seems to be a strong park advocate. I believe she actually served as a Recreation and Park District Director somewhere out there in the
I think that's right. Yeah.
Suisun City, and I don't know what district it is over there, but she does bring in some working knowledge of who we are, what we do, and I know she's very interested. So
Yeah, very enthusiastic, and it's just a small part of her district, but she was very, very enthused to help.
well, and bear in mind, she hired a gentleman by the name of Mark Rossow, and Mark staffed Proposition 68 for Eduardo Garcia.
Oh, great.
So Mark knows park issues inside and out. Worked with them very closely. So
Terrific.
it's a very good sign.
Thank you.
Great. Doug, thank you so much. A lot going on. Really appreciate the update and insights. Very helpful.
pleasure.
Good. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing more to add. Want to thank Doug for all of his work in Sacramento. It's great having someone on the ground up in the Capitol. And then also do want to share with the board that we are excited to initiate some in-person advocacy days in Sacramento next year. And then also we are going to work strategically on our legislative luncheon timing so that folks aren't on vacation when we're doing it. We're thinking a little bit earlier in the session so we can have some good conversations. So we really hope for a fruitful 2023 and are grateful for all of the hard work of 2022.
Great. Thank you so much. So at this point, we can turn it over to Lisa for the legislative program updates.
Wonderful. So item A1A is Resolution 46, which is in celebration and honor of the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. The technical day of celebration, the act was signed on October 18th. So just earlier this week was the formal 50th anniversary. And this bill is really acknowledging the intent of the Clean Water Act. For those of you familiar with the act, it has had challenges being implemented. It has been sort of influenced by various administrations and their thoughts. However, in reading the language of this bill, it really highlights the opportunity of the Clean Water Act to help address the challenges, especially in environmental justice communities where clean water is needed most. And so this would be a recommended support to honor the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act.
Okay.
Continuing, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and continue. We'll take them all as a group, but board members, please feel free to interrupt if you have questions on any of these.
All right, and just
ahead.
by way of context, all of our bills today are federal because, as you heard from Flora and Doug, the state legislative session has closed out for the year. So our next piece of federal legislation is an exciting one, and one that we really haven't seen this type of focus before on grassland conservation. So this bill is seeking to create a flexible grant program to invest in grassland conservation. Special districts will be eligible to apply should the program come to fruition. And this really aligns well with the Park District's current efforts to map our vegetation. So the work of Deanette Robertson and our stewardship colleagues on fine scale vegetation mapping to fully understand the restoration needs of the lands, the sequestration potential, and the overall health of grasslands here in the East Bay. And so we're really excited that should this grant program be established, we think we would be strong candidates for application and award of these funding. All right, our next bill is one that our board is familiar with. It is the National Discovery Trails Act. And this is a piece of legislation that seeks to add the existing American Discovery Trail to the National Trail System. And beyond adding the trail that does run through the East Bay, through Antioch and Walnut Creek to the summit of Mount Diablo, this legislation would also create a general recognition of discovery trails as part of the National Trail Program. So it has those two benefits, both acknowledging a trail that does run through the East Bay, but also create another category of national trails.
And Mark Desaulnier is a co-sponsor of that legislation, I understand.
Correct. Thank you. All right, moving right along, our next bill aligns really closely with a strong focus of the government affairs team, which is green jobs. So this Civilian Conservation Center Enhancement Act is seeking to create and operate 24 civilian conservation centers across the US. And these centers would host Conservation Corps members, with each federal agency hiring 300 students a year. But what's really exciting and specific about this bill is that it's striving to create a career ladder. So while those Corps members are participating in the program, they're also going to be trained in firefighting and other career opportunities in vegetation management and protection of land management. And so we see this program as it could be seeding future East Bay Regional Park District employees and giving them the experience. And it also really aligns with the goals of our existing fuels crew here at the Park District, of our permanent and benefit employees in the fuels crew who are also receiving similar training. Our next legislation is, again, this is something that's important and exciting to see at the federal level, is the Natural Infrastructure Act. Here in California, we are pretty frequently discussing natural infrastructure and what that looks like on our shoreline and shifting gray to green spaces. However, we were really enthusiastic to see this as part of a national discussion. So in our bubble, we hear this word all the time, but it's not so frequent in federal bills. And so what this program is seeking to do is create an assessment of the needed natural infrastructure through a joint effort between the Department of Interior and Department of Agriculture. And so it would be a $4 million investment to create that assessment. It's currently estimated that there's over $4 trillion in infrastructure repairs that are needed across the country. And so again, this is simply a study to start, but as these discussions on natural infrastructure continue at the federal level, the Park District stands ready to share best practices and be a part of the solution. All right, moving right along. This next piece of legislation is acknowledging current increases on insurance policies covering damages from wildfire. And what it would do was it would require FEMA and the Government Accountability Office to study the extent to which private insurers have increased rates and recommend possible actions. From our perspective, something that's important in this bill is that there is a specific focus on opportunities for lower income homeowners to either receive funding to relocate or subsidized insurance. And this is just a preliminary study, but we hope that the information from it will bring a certain level of accountability in protection and mitigation from wildfire. Okay, continuing on the focus on wildfire, our last bill today is a bill that would direct FEMA to update the categories of eligibility and timeline for fire management assistance. So at this time, when the last flame is put out on a fire, that is typically when FEMA concludes their time responding to that incident. However, we as land managers understand that there continues to be risks even when there's not a flame burning. So post-fire risks can include burn scars, mudslides, potential flooding, erosion damage. And so the hope is that this bill would have FEMA continue to support even past the fire has been extinguished. All right, and that concludes our section of recommended support.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, very much for the summary of all those bills. Director Lane or Director Coffey, did you have any questions, comments on this list?
No.
Oh. Okay. Okay, so I guess Beverly, did you have something?
No, we need a motion to forward this recommendation.
Thank you, yes.
So I'll make that motion.
Second.
Great, and can our clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Eccles,
Aye.
Director Lane,
Aye.
Director Coffey.
Aye.
Motion passes. Motion made by Director Lane, second from Director Coffey. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's see, we don't have any item. Thank you very much. We don't have anything under recommended oppose or watch. We do have a recommended ballot measure. So maybe Lisa, if you could quickly cover that, that's the last action item. And then I think I will turn the chair over to either Colin or Beverly, whoever wants to take it for the remaining items.
Beverly's actually a member of the committee and should do that.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Beverly.
Okay, so just real quick, so a recommended ballot measure for opposition, a formal vote. We have spoken about this ballot measure at a former committee, but we didn't take a formal action. But today we are recommending a vote of opposition. So this is the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And this initiative, it is opposed by the California Special District Association. And the reason for that is it would strongly impact enterprise districts, such as water districts and others who charge fees. Though it's not likely that this will substantially impact the Park District, we recommend opposition in solidarity with other special districts. It may have the potential to impact our lighting and landscape districts, and we could work with our finance team to understand that more fully. And then just by way of context, this initiative would go before the voters on the November 2024 presidential ballot. And should it be passed in that statewide general election, it would be retroactive to November of this year. So anything on this November ballot would be impacted by the vote in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
That's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, and very interesting. It's surprising they can even do that, but well, I suppose it could be challenged in court, but anyway, yeah, so Director Coffey, did you have any comments, or Director Lane?
No.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion?
Okay, I'll move.
Yeah, second.
Great. Could our clerk please-
Opposition.
Yes, in opposition, absolutely. Okay, our clerk could call the roll, please.
Absolutely. Chair Eccles,
Yes, aye for opposition, yes.
Eccles, aye. Director Lane,
Aye.
Lane, aye. Director Coffey,
Aye.
Coffey, aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the chair to Beverly. Thank you very much for doing that. And Colin, thank you for joining us here today as the alternate to the alternate or something like that. Appreciate you being here. Always a pleasure. All right. So with that, and you guys are all frozen. I don't even know if you can hear me, but if you can hear me,
Yeah,
thank
we
you
can
very
hear
much.
you.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, you're frozen on my screen. Great. I'm glad you can hear me. Maybe it's the phone. But anyway, thank you for everything, and we'll see you all soon. Have a great weekend.
All right, have a great weekend.
Thanks.
All right, so our next item is B, projects and programs. And we're talking about, we have 2 items under that. So Lisa?
Absolutely. So our first item under projects and programs is our proposed 2023 sponsored legislation. As Flora previewed in her presentation earlier, we are in the early stages of developing some policy context around raising the administrative limit from 50,000 to 200,000. This would be an active legislation that would allow, hopefully, for special park districts such as ourselves to have the opportunity to have our highest administrative limit at 200,000 per contract. And we are also exploring the opportunity for an escalator clause, so that way we're able to increase that limit annually rather than in 10 years from now having to sponsor another piece of legislation. This bill is going to be co-sponsored with Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. And something that's interesting for context on this, we did do an assessment of the past 3 years of contracts that ranged from over 50,000 and below 200,000 that went before the board. And it was strongly administrative contracts, things such as fleet vehicle purchases, Adobe software purchases, and other administrative tasks that happen on an annual basis. And so that's what we plan to share as part of these discussions.
So I have a question. Lisa, where is the statutory scheme that creates the present limitation on park district general managers?
So the current legislation, and I can send you the exact bill number, it does have us at 50,000, and that was something that folks from the park district worked on a few years back. Doug, do you know the exact bill number?
No, we can find the code section for you, Director Copy. But yeah, I think we spearheaded the effort to increase it from 25 to 50 for
All right, so it's a
public
statutory,
resources.
it's a code in public resources code, I guess, on
That's my recollection.
specific to park districts. And how long ago was it set to 50?
All right, so it's Public Resource Code 5549, which allows for general managers of park and open space districts with board approval to bind the district in accordance with board policy that has been adopted up to not exceeding 50,000. This went into effect. That one might take me a little longer to find.
$55.49, Lisa.
Yeah, is the code.
Yeah.
We may have to follow up with.
All right, the point
Oh,
being,
2015. It was established in 2015 by AB 495 from Assemblymember Gordon. And it raised it from 25,000 to 50,000 and was co-sponsored by East Bay Parks and Mid-Peninsula Open Space District.
okay. Yeah, I do agree. And then at some point we would need to move it on our level too. It would need to go because I think that would be an amendment of our park operations manual.
That is correct. So what staff is striving to do is shift the public resource. And the reason for the $200,000 limit by way of context is that is the government code for county governments who have a population of over 200,000. So we're striving to sort of copy and paste that code into our public resource code. And then you are absolutely correct that all that would do is give the opportunity for the park district to have up to 200,000, and it would take an act of our elected board to change the park district's policy.
So it strikes me that this should be done in tandem sort of, so that make sure your own board's on board with seeking that authority. I realize there's no downside to it since we have to adopt it at our board level. But there should be some tandem use of your folks' time to address it both with legislature and with us. And I think it's a very reasonable thing to pursue, especially when you're talking about our agency compared to other park agencies. We have close to what are we, $300 million budget annually now, close to that. When you add operations and capital. And for there to be a $50,000 limitation on what the GM's authorized to approve, that does entail then a lot of these purely administrative contracts that end up on our consent calendar going to the board, and each and every one of them requires a bunch of work by staff to put together for a board packet. And it would, I think, do well for efficiency and costs to pare that down. So I'm glad we're pursuing this.
Yeah, so those are good points. And what I would recommend is that you spend a little more time on the explanation for this in the legislative minutes. And then when that goes to the board, ask that that be highlighted. You know, because we do read the minutes, but it's good to have some advice on something that like this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would also note, Lisa, and maybe you know this, but 2018, there was an amendment revision wherein Assemblymember Mays allowed for the $50,000 provision to apply to all park districts. So I think there's a distinct distinction between park districts and regional park districts just by budget alone. So I think we have pretty sound justification.
That is correct. And just by way of transparency, I believe that same legislation, or at least legislation that year, also did create the potential for board to adopt a 2% annual increase on the upper limit. Unfortunately, it would take 71 years to reach the $200,000 limit that we're trying to achieve with this legislation. So.
Good point. All right.
All right. Our next item under project and programs is just a quick update on our fall voter survey. So as the committee is familiar with, the government affairs team project manages 2 surveys annually. Past spring, we administered a survey, a scientific survey that was weighted to community demographics and provided foundational and contextual information for our capital improvement prioritization policy, capital project prioritization policy. This fall, we are in the early stages of developing a survey. It will be of 600 East Bay residents, multimodal, multilingual. It is intended to be conducted either late 2023 or very early in, late 2022 or very early in 2023. And the reason for that is that we were advised by our consultants that with the different inflation and other things on people's minds, that waiting a little bit after the election would be best for the survey we're striving to conduct. The survey questionnaire is intended to include questions on our draft 2023 legislative program, some of our proposed priorities, which we do intend to discuss with the board in advance. And then we also intend to continue our longitudinal assessment for a parcel tax measure district-wide.
Okay. And are we going to use the same survey firm? Is that?
Great question. That had intended to be my opening. So we did go through a request for proposals for this survey questionnaire, and it was Tolchin Research who was selected as our survey consultant. We have not previously worked with Tolchin on a scientific survey. However, they did meet the requirements of the proposal and were selected.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Colin? Okay. All right, let's move on then. You're just going to report on site visits, meetings. I think we already did that with the report, right?
Yes, that sounds, yeah. I think we went over most of these. I'm happy to take any questions if either of you have them.
Well, I will say we've been getting out to Thurgood Marshall, which I'm really happy to see. And I know Desaulniers was pleased to see that many people show up for his. And I think it's really important to get people out to the parks to see these. So I'm glad we're able to manage that as often as we are. I do, so these are the planned ones. So does the legislative, and sometimes they're planned very quickly, right?
Correct.
So does the legislative staff do all of that planning, or do you fold in anybody from public affairs?
So I need to applaud our legislative assistant, Flora Chantos, who is really the individual who leads the coordination of the events, working with public safety, working with interpretation and recreation, operations, park staff, and really brings it together. So sort of the delineation between a government affairs event and a public affairs event is public affairs leads community events in spaces such as those. If it is a elected official focused event, that's when government affairs will step up. And Flora, I don't know if you want to say any more, but really want to applaud all the work she does on these.
Well, and some of these, I think we had really last minute. I mean, somebody prominent says, oh, they'd like to come to the regional parks. And we say, oh, come. And then Flora, you put it together, right? Is that how it goes?
Yes, that is an uncanny summary. That has been known to happen. It's been one of the most exciting things for me to witness this year is these high-level folks reaching out last minute and that we're able to accommodate it. And they see us as a partner. They see us as a future stopping point. It's been some of these high-level relationship building opportunities came about because we do have a strong team and we're able to be reactive when these strategic invitations and requests pop up, and they do come together in a matter of a few days in some cases. And it would not be possible without operations, our interp and rec colleagues, as Lisa mentioned, our public safety colleagues. It's really very collaborative.
I'm really pleased with what we've been able to do this year. And just I remind you that any board members, you can get to those in a timely manner. The board members especially, we especially like to see the president there, but if you're in somebody's ward, they want to be there too. So remember the board member.
I think we can commit to that.
Yeah.
Folks have been so responsive, all of our board members. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I think we view that as that's like right up there on the top of what we should be doing. And so occasionally nobody calls and then they get annoyed. So it's good to call.
We had a sort of a site visit that involved us. It was sponsored by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, but in effect, we had Secretary Buttigieg out at Thurgood Marshall, at least a portion of the park, and we had the opportunity to describe our plans for that park and also put in a little pitch with Secretary Pete for active transportation funds. So it was a useful site visit, even though it wasn't ours.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Okay, anything else? I have other matters. No other matters. All right, then we will see if there are any people who have joined us and would like to make public comments. Are there anyone? Is there anyone?
We do not have any requests for public comment, Chair Lane.
All right, and then we have articles in social media, and I appreciate your putting those together for us. And I'm glad to see we're doing this digitally now instead of feeling like we need to produce paper. So that's a very positive thing. Do you have any comments on the articles, Colin?
No, I don't.
Okay, all right. And next is board comments. Any board comments?
Nothing more. Just thank you for all the good work. All of you.
Okay. Indeed, many thanks. And I think, I think this is probably my last legislative meeting, and I want to say again how much I appreciate working on legislation. I appreciate being on the committee this year and hearing both from Doug and Peter regularly. It's very helpful to help as we read the papers and try and understand what on earth is going on. And so happy holidays to all of you. And
We'll miss you,
with that-
for
And
sure.
with that, we're adjourned.